So Jess, very kindly, this is Jess Saunders, FYI. We'll get a proper intro from her in a minute. Jess very kindly offered to step in, and while we were trying to work out what she was going to talk about, we came to the realisation that I'm about to try and start podcasting, and the format for that is just going to be sitting down. I'm very lucky to have a lot of friends who are very, very talented and in the games industry. So I thought it would be a nice thing to kind of get the background to how these careers are developing and how it happened and what was the trigger and all of that kind of stuff and leading people to where they are now. So I know a lot of us are in the industry. You're my captive audience. That's how this is going to work. Okay, but if there are any students here, woo, captive. No, they love it. They've got Stockholm syndrome already. This is brilliant. So if any students did manage to make it this evening, then this might be interesting. It will be interesting, hopefully. But it might be useful, I should say. So I'm going to hand over to Jess. Do you want to give us just a little heads up of who you are and what you're doing now, and then we'll go back to the beginning?
Yeah, sure.
Here.
Thank you. Can I press a little button?
No, just talk.
Just talk.
There you go.
So yes, my name's Jessica Saunders. I've just recently started up my own indie development team called Salix Games. We are in pre-production on a new title currently, which is very exciting. But before that, I've been a sound designer in the AAA industry almost solely for the past 6 or 7 years. Most recently, I worked on Batman Arkham Knight, and last year I was one of BAFTA's Breakthrough Brit winners. So I've been very lucky. I've worked for a lot of companies. I've seen a lot of things, met some incredible people along the way. Miss Carter, one of them.
No more.
So now I feel it's time to start telling my own stories, literally, and that's what Salix Games will be about. And
super exciting. Right, here we go. Okay. So the thing that I'm really interested in at the moment, and I know there's been a couple of mentions this evening about the ratio of men and women in the industry. Yep. We are both women, right?
Yes, we are.
Check that out. There's at least 5 others. This is great. I don't know if there's even that many. So what really fascinates me is, it's kind of a bigger thing. So I wonder if that currently playing games as a young girl, as a child, that's a thing. That's totally a thing. When we were kids, that wasn't so much of a thing. Yeah. So I wonder if it's more nurture, and whether it's your dad that's really into video games, and then that kind of leads you into it that way. So what was your trigger that kind of got you thinking video games could be a career? This is something I could do, or what made you think I really want to give this a go?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a roundabout way. I started getting interested in video games at a very young age. My father's a scientist. He actually works up at the research park, and he was very into his tech. He works in software, so he would start to bring home these PC games. And I would just sit, before I could even really play these games, and just sit and watch him for hours and hours play these games through, We're talking old school things like Masters of Orion and Rama, things based on books, like proper old PC games. And then as I got older, it became my kind of monthly treat to go to PC World and buy a PC game for myself, and I'd play through Myst myself and all that thing, and I just fell in love with it. I wasn't allowed a console. My mum said no to consoles. PC was allowed, but I was never allowed a console. I didn't start playing console games until I was about 18. But to get there, I kind of went through a really miserable teenage goth phase where I was just too cool for anything. And so I didn't play a lot of games. I was convinced I was going to be in a rock band, and it all went horribly wrong. But then I kind of got back into the love of games, kind of seeing where games had progressed, seeing what was happening in the market, what kind of games were out there, and the fact that they had grown up with me in many ways. And I was just, this is what I've loved, this is what I've always loved. Now I'm kind of accepted the fact that I'm probably the least cool person in the room. I'm okay with making these things. And so, I ended up picking my uni degree based on the fact that it had a game audio course. So I was very lucky in that I knew I wanted to do it for a while.
Absolutely. And from that point, when you're at university, was it just a natural flair for audio? What made you think, I want to do sound design? Like that's where I want to go.
I actually owe that to Lord of the Rings. I was obsessed with Fellowship of the Ring when that came out, obsessed. I watched that film multiple times, and I devoured the DVDs and the extended editions, and they had all these wonderful little documentaries about how they made the film, like the sculptures. And then I saw one on sound design. And I saw these guys running around in tunnels in New Zealand, playing sounds out of wooden boxes to get the sounds of the Ents. I saw what craftsmanship went into firing an arrow, something that's so simple, but you have to break it down into each part. And I just thought, what a great way to make a living. So after kind of having that in the background, I was always a musical kid. You know, I did piano lessons, I did guitar lessons, I did violin lessons, but I am by no means a musician, having dropped out of all of them. But I got really into music tech. It was an option given at my college, and I took that, and I was very lucky in that I just was good at it. I ended up scoring one of the highest in my class in my first production things, and just having someone sit down and tell you, you were the best at this. Like, you were actually really good at this, was like, oh, maybe I found something I can do. So yeah, I got really into music tech and pushed that, and then it was more like, yes, I'm going to do sound design. I'm going to give this a go. I'd never given it a go before. I was always very music oriented. Even in my music tech course, it was recording music. I got marked really heavily down on one piece because we had to submit a score, and I'd done this really kind of atmospheric sound design piece, which obviously you can't classically score. So I ended up getting almost a null grade because I had to just basically send loads of screen caps of what compression I used, here's the MIDI files that I used, etc. So yeah, I ended up getting into sound design when I went to uni. I took a gamble on it. And for me, again, I don't know if it's luck, but my first sound design module, I just got on with it. I found it that I understood sound design. I don't know if it's because I've been paying more attention to it as growing up, but it became something that when actually sitting down and bringing out a scene and like laying the tracks and working out what detail needed to go where, it came quite naturally to me. And it was only once I'd had that confidence of having that kind of bit of a natural ability that I just pushed it. So through my degree, I pushed it and I pushed it. Everything I did on my degree was to work in the games industry. Everything I did in my degree was to be the best sound designer that I could do. You know, I made myself quite ill working my socks off to do that. If you're a student, don't do that. I really don't recommend making yourself ill. I shouldn't have done that. But on the plus side, I got a job straight out of uni.
Well, that's very much my next question. So how, when you were really ill and really exhausted,
yeah.
How long was it before you ended up? So Dan, if you want to give us our first screen, that will give away not just Jess's first job in the industry, but also where we met.
Yes.
Right, with that 57 Metacritic.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, tell me about how you ended up getting to Codemasters.
Yeah. So the Codemasters things again started with uni, and everything I did, as I said, was to push for a career in the games industry. And one of those things between my second and third year, when I started doing like 1 or 2 sound design modules, we were going to do a game audio module in my third year. I basically contacted every single games company I could. I Googled for people's names, I searched the internet for email addresses and postcodes, because I had the terrible experience.
Postcodes, that's creepy.
Yeah, so I found Lionhead.
Okay, as long as, okay, that's fine.
Because I had an incident where I got a call from EA asking if I was interested in an internship between my second. Then I was like, that's brilliant, but they wanted me to essentially drop out of my degree. I said, oh, I can't do that. But I was so excited in taking the phone call and so naive, I didn't ask who was calling. So then trying to get hold of anyone in the games industry, if you don't have a name to someone, it's just impossible. So after that, I learnt my lesson. I ended up sending my CV to Rush Shaw at Lionhead. I literally pitched up on Lionhead's door after finding their postcode on the internet and handing my CV to a lovely woman called Rachel, who used to be the receptionist at Lionhead, who ended up becoming a very close friend of mine, which was a funny coincidence in the end. So from begging and stealing, I actually met the audio director of Codemasters at my uni, and I just straight out said, can I have some work experience, please? And he was like, yeah, right. It was pretty much that simple. And so I went to work with the audio team at Codemasters Guildford, who were doing the body count very early in production between my second and third year. And that was amazing because it was James Slavin who took me under his wing, and he's now audio director at DICE, working on Mirror's Edge. And he gave me the best intro to the games industry I could have asked for, because he sat me down with every different department, and I spent at least 2 or 3 hours with the heads of each department and learnt about every single skill that went on into making a game. And I still hold that as the most valuable piece of information that I've got in my industry experience. Like, that information and what that led to, and the people who I know and what they do has led to the best game making experience, because we need to work together, we need to know what each other does, and it's so common for people to be in their little bubble and not see what each other are doing. So that's my best piece of advice to anyone, is learn more about game development than just your niche. So yeah, I did my work experience there, went off and finished my degree, had my nervous breakdown, and
before that, I would like to just ask how. So coming into Cody's, I know you said that you went to Slaven and said, "Can I have some work?" It wasn't some work. I mean, you must have gone into full-on crunch as soon as you hit the ground, right? Because that wonderful game was tough, right? Getting that out was difficult. So how was that? What kind of how did you rationalise? Because I know crunch is such a difficult thing for people to explain and to defend. Not that we should be defending it, I don't think. What was that experience like?
Well, I didn't experience crunch at Codemasters till I went back to them. So I did my work experience with them, and then after when I said I was very ill, I was emailing around all the companies saying, "Can I have a job?" And Codemasters invited me back to take on a dialogue position, which eventually got extended. I took on a position of sound designer. Within about 2 days, I got upgraded from dialogue to sound designer because someone left, and that was my introduction to crunch. It was an absolute true baptism of fire. We worked ourselves to the bone. I'm sure as many of you in this room have experienced, it is just heartbreaking. But the thing with Codemasters is, and it's a thing that I haven't actually had, I'm a contractor by trade mainly. So I've worked for a lot of big companies, and I get called in as a gun for hire. So I come in, I do the crunch period, I turf out content and get it implemented as quickly as possible, and then we're asked politely to leave at the end. But with Codemasters, it was a bit of a special time because we just had such an amazing team.
Yeah.
A lot of us were fairly new. When Lauran, and we bonded quickly. When I was at Codemasters, I started there, I was the only one of 2 women in the studio. One was a producer, I was the only woman on the development team. And then Lauran started, it was, oh my God, we can talk about shoes and cats. And it was just instant bonding.
That's pretty much what we did.
And so it was things like that, and just making the most incredible friends across all teams that made it okay. In Guildford, Codemasters positions, we'd finish work at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go to Fahrenheit, have a last couple drinks, crash out for the night and back in for the office for 9 o'clock in the morning. And we did that for an unhealthy amount of time. But because it was my first job, I didn't know any better. It was new and it was exciting, and it was, these people are really cool, they're so into it. And now I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Just quite simply no. Video games are my life. I've put everything that I have into doing it, but it's not.
You've got to draw a line.
You've got to draw a line. It's not worth your health, and it's not worth, especially when it becomes detrimental to the project. I've seen that so many cases. You're tired, you're knackered, you make stupid mistakes. But yeah, as my first industry job, I was young, I was naive, and there is really this kind of very love for crunch. I think people romanticize it, and it's I'm more hardcore than you because I was staying later, and I've worked 50 hours this week. Well, I've worked 55, and it's well, what were you actually doing with that time? Were you sitting and having a coffee and moaning? Were you watching iPlayer? Were you actually doing work? Or is it all of the above because your brain just shuts off when you're first forced to walk those kind of hours?
Absolutely. And it's something, anyone that follows me on Twitter, kind of going back to Codemasters itself, I know that I've been actively pouring my heart out about Lionhead and everything that happened there. But Codemasters was very similar. I mean, that was a situation where we really built, that place gave me the foundations for what I'm doing now. Yeah. It gave me the contacts and the knowledge and the experience. When it came to what you were doing, I remember coming up to the audio tower and you showing me how you put a kind of a tracker in so that something makes a sound when you walk past
Yeah.
it. It blew my mind. Like, I didn't know that that's what you were doing up there. Oh, you hear that little squeak? Yeah, well, I've put this in here, and that means that you'll hear that squeak. I couldn't deal with it. It was insane. So was there anything, that first kind of year at Codemasters, out of uni and really getting into the swing of things, anything in that first year that you could that you learnt at uni that you could really then apply to that first kind of job in the industry? Oh God.
No.
Good.
It was very strange. Like I said, I did my work experience and I went back and did my third year and I did the game audio module. And after having spoken to a lot of game developers and seeing what they were doing, I just realised just how out of touch my university course was. Absolutely nothing I learned in my game audio module was relevant to my game industry experience. The best thing that game audio module did for us was Codemasters happened to be mixing Flashpoint in the university studios, and that's how I met the audio director. I basically sat in, they were there for about a week, and I sat in every day while the guys were mixing it, and I was the only one that came in every day from the beginning, stayed all day, because it was open to all the students on the music tech course. But I was the only one that was there every day, asking all the questions, asking what was going on, how do you do that? Because it's very different now with access to middleware. So now students, especially when it comes to audio, get access to Wise, and you can use Wise really easily with Unity and Unreal. We didn't have that 10 years ago when I was on my degree course. That was just not an option. And so we were using things that previous students had written really clumsily in Flash. I had to learn little bits of ActionScript too, and I was like, this is just ridiculous. But the actual understanding of how audio gets put in the game was not explained properly. And it wasn't until I started being hands-on and seeing how it's done that I really understood it. And also what's the most important thing is that I learned from my degree to going into work is every company is different. Like, no one uses Unreal in the same way. No one uses Unity in the same way. You've always got a team of coders adding extra bits. You have to completely relearn an engine each time you go to a different company. You know, I've worked for 5 or 6 of the biggest companies in the UK, and each time I've had to relearn how it's done. Like, there are fundamentals. At the end of the day, an editor is an editor. You know roughly what tools should be there and what is, but they've got like different names, slightly different buttons in different places. And I wish I'd kind of known that as a student. Yeah. I really do. So I think the students now have a much better hope of grasping it instantly, whereas I kind of came in and went, oh shit, this is not what I was expecting. But I loved it.
Yeah, you got through it.
Yeah.
So after the unfortunate demise of Guildford Codies, this is Dan's cue. Can we have another slide, please?
Yeah.
You then came to Lionhead, which is where we intertwined again, because you got me my job at Lionhead. So essentially, this is your fault.
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
So, if you want to just talk a little bit about Fable Heroes, which is one of my favourites, I have to say.
Fable Heroes was one of my favourite projects. I came on at Codemasters to do it as dialogue editor for 3 months, and then Malin, one of the other sound designers, she left the day after I started, so suddenly I was bumped up and took her position to sound designer. So I was really thrown in the deep end in regards of getting content in-game and creating content. So when this position opened up at Lionhead, they wanted someone who was junior enough to be cheap, but senior enough to just be able to get on with it. So I was actually the only sound designer on this project. I had a chap called Wes Larter come in a bit later who did some anims for some little dogs and helped me with the final mix of the game. But the overall sound of this game, talking to the composers, working out what we wanted, it was my baby, and this was my second ever job. You know, I'd only been in the industry for a couple of years. It was so exciting to be given that responsibility, and I just had an absolute blast with it. The team was only about 15 people. And
so Fable Heroes, do you want to give a little bit of backstory to Fable Heroes in case no one...
Oh yeah, so Fable Heroes is a 4-player little kind of hack and slash adventure game as you run through the world of Albion as puppets. And it was actually created as part of Lionhead's Creative Day. So a group of the team had got together and made this little prototype, and they loved it, and they kind of nursed it in the background for a while. And eventually it kind of got to 80% completion and had no audio, and then they panicked and rang me. And so I was only at Lion... Yes, it was. It was called Foreplay to start with.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, I came on when the game was mainly feature complete, but it had no audio. So I basically had 4.5 months to do the entire audio job. If someone said that to me now, I'd be like, what? That's a bit much. But I did it, and I had to use Fable Ed, which is still the worst editor I've ever used in my life. It was the most backwards thing, but it was Fable Heroes was the swan song of that editor, and we got it done. But yeah, I loved that little game. It was just so much fun, and it was so opposite to anything I'd done. Like Body Count was a hardcore shooter. All the games I played were all very serious and dark, and this was something light and fun, which I'd never done before. And essentially, my whole idea behind the audio for this game was just a toy box, a giant toy box. So you can see Hammer with her little rosy cheeks. Her giant hammer had a random occurrence that it would squeak every now and then like a toy. And what's his name? I can't remember his name. The one that's the little crown, had a little shotgun, like a little cork gun, so he made little pop sounds, and we tried to make it sound as childlike as possible.
He's adorable.
Possibly, I can't remember.
Hero. But never mind.
The one next to Jack.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, Reba. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've just realised that we're really good at talking. It's already 10 to 10. We've got 10 minutes. We're going to get through everything else you've ever done.
Okay, let's go.
So no pressure. Let's move on from Lionhead to... Dan, could we have our next slide, please? Of course.
Yeah.
I forgot about this one.
Yeah.
So if you want to... Yeah, maybe that's why.
Yeah. We'll talk about this one very briefly.
Yeah.
Very briefly.
Here we go.
So staying in the Microsoft family, I moved from Lionhead over to Rare pretty much straight afterwards. I'd worked with the composer Robin Beanland even, on Fable Heroes, and he put in a good word for me when this was started. When I took the position on this, I was promised it wasn't a Kinect Sports title, and we ended up creating Kinect Sports Rivals. It was an interesting project, but I had a lot of fun with it. We had a really good team. Like, I don't know if you know, but Rare is literally in the middle of nowhere. So we were very isolated, and so we had to work very closely together. And I learnt a lot. It got me my first real hands-on with Wise, which has really become an industry standard. And like Martin taught me so much behind that. We started looking into interactive music systems, which was really cool. I got my first hands onto getting onto UI systems and creating sounds for that, which was awesome, and actually really furthered my career later on. And I made friends for life. And I met 2 girls at Rare who we see each other for every couple of months. You know, we get up and get dressed and we cosplay together, MCM every year, and we really formed again these really tight bonds from working on not necessarily the greatest projects.
It's true. Sometimes the not so great projects coupled with the crunch, that just makes friends for life. That's how it works. Not that I've worked on any not so great projects, I don't really know.
The thing is, it was an absolutely incredible team. The talent behind the title was incredible. Like, there is not a single bad developer on this game. It didn't do well. It wasn't the game I don't think that either Microsoft or Rare hoped to make, but everyone that worked on it should be really proud of what they did, because we fought against all odds. Like, there was a brand new engine when we were making that, and we fought against all odds and we got it done, and it was a pretty game. It was a pretty game.
It is really pretty. Yeah. Okay, so from that point, and at this point, are you getting a bit more senior as you go from role to role, and your role's changing a little bit? So tell us a little bit about that. Yeah. A little bit about that, and then where you went from there.
Okay. So I took on a bit more seniority at Rivals. I started to own a few systems, like the game was essentially split into mini games. So I owned, I think it was pretty much jet ski, tennis, and rock climbing were my big 3. I didn't really touch pistol shooting, but like I had to do all the sounds for the tennis. And like I don't even know what tennis is really. And people were telling me like you have to make sounds for a slide and a backhand. I was like, oh, I had to get someone to say, go, right, a slide is a swoosh. This one's more of a whoosh whoosh. And I was like, now I've got you. And went away and did the sounds for that. But yeah, I wasn't, so to basically just, the same as most people here, as you go from job to job, you take on more and more responsibility. My workload increased dramatically when I went to my next company.
Dan.
Which was Rocksteady, and I had the absolute pleasure on working on Arkham Knight. Now this was a game where I really did start to have more of a say about what was going on. For example, I looked after the entire UI system on Arkham Knight. Which was amazing for me because I was a huge fan of the franchise before I got a chance to work on it. And I got to redo detective mode. So the detective mode you hear in Arkham Knight is mine. I made that from scratch. I redid the Riddler trophy pickup sounds, which was one of my favourite. And it was like just having a chance to do that on one of your favourite franchises was astounding. But yeah, so I looked after the UI system, the Waller system, which is background chatter, like combat barks, etc. The physics system, the destructible system. So when the Batmobile runs into things, we had lots of systems in place to have it, depending on what it was hitting, how hard it was hitting, and what it was hitting, those fragments were falling onto. We had an entire system built around that, which we took a lot of information from the Batmobile itself. So I started getting really techie on Batman. One of my favourite little bits is something that's possibly one of the least noticed is if you go into GCPD, like the prison section, is actually a 100% dynamic population. So depending on what parts of the game that you've finished, different cells will have different people in them. And I've devised a system in the Kismet to basically say, right, we draw a box around each cell. Now the cell will then take how many people, is the cell occupied, how many people, and change the sound depending on each of that. So each cell had its own system for if it was 1 or 2 people in there, for if it was 20 people in there, and everything in between. And that was done for all 9 cells. And then as you went to each one, you could hear it. Like, so our militia were very much more military, much more sharp, where our thugs would be much more like, you look like you're wearing your grand's pajamas and all this kind of stuff. And the Dollartrons would just be sitting there kind of wobbling and crying. And then we changed it so that when there's the spoilers, the big attack on the police precinct at the end of the game, they suddenly started all screaming and yelling. And again, that depended on how much you'd progressed through the game, who you'd caught, who you hadn't caught. So we had so if you had done the pig side story and you completed that, the Dollartrons started laughing hysterically during that scene if that cell was full. And that was really good fun. That was a big technical challenge, and it just goes, I hope you understand how much effort us audio people put into these games that not many people think about, but hopefully it adds that extra layer.
And just in case no one knows, how popular was that game? How well did that do?
It did all right, I think.
I'm obsessed with Metacritics.
I think we've closed in at 89.
Nice. Oh, that's nice. That's a good number.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I guess that, your involvement in that and just how successful and how loved it was led to BAFTA getting in contact?
Yes. So yeah, I won one of last year's Breakthrough Brit Award positions, which was amazing. And honestly, I still don't know quite how it happened. I basically got an email through to my work email address one day saying, "Oh, you've been nominated for this award." And I was like, hang on, how? And I kind of ignored it for a couple of days. I wasn't sure if it was just a generic spam thing. And then BAFTA ran Rocksteady and said, "Can you make sure Jessica got that email because she needs to apply for this?" So I went through the whole process and I put my show reel together, mainly stuff from Batman, and kind of explaining this is what I'd done, what my position was on the project, who I was working with, because there was about 4 or 5 of us working in-house, from Nick Arundel, the director and composer, to Andrew Quinn and Andrew Riley, who were integral to kind of getting the main part of the game done before I was there. Like Lee Banyard was there, who's gone off to do Cloud Emporium and stuff, and Sam Jones was there, who's now at Sony. And so we had this really amazing team, and so being able to carve out your own niche within that team was really cool. Especially towards the end, me and Quinn, we played off each other's strengths and weaknesses. I'm a lot better at little bleepy bloopy sounds that don't really match or anything, and he's much better at cars and explosions. And so that's why he was Mr. Batmobile, and I looked after the UI system. So yeah, I put that all forward and talked about that in my BAFTA application, and I just kept getting through to the next round until one day I got a phone call saying, "Can you make sure you're free on this date, because we'll tell you if you've won tomorrow, and if you have, you've got to come and do a photo shoot." And then next thing I know, I'm in this gorgeous, several grand Burberry green coat, which I love, having my photo taken. I hate having my photo taken. And so there's lots of me just kind of going and just looking bewildered into the camera and being grumpy.
Majestic.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
Majestic.
And they made my hair all big and scruffy, and it was like, what is happening? I don't
I didn't
quite understand
recognise
this.
you when those photos came
It's
out.
weird,
Who's this
isn't it?
chick?
I know.
She's got my friend's name.
So yeah, I got to do that, and then we had a lovely ceremony at Burberry Regent Street, and my connection with BAFTA has been brilliant because it's allowed me to meet so many people. It's given me a door into the institute and has put me in contact with so many people that have really helped me on my next part of the journey, which if we go to the next slide,
Thanks, Dan.
is Salix Games, which is my new company. So I've been setting this all up recently, spending lots of time talking to various tax people, accountants people, contractors, and all the fun and game of setting up an independent studio. And I'm loving every second of it. We're starting to get work through from our artists, and we're really, really proud and excited of what's coming. If you Google us, you will find not much at the moment. The website is basically just a holding point while we're getting our logos and branding finalised, and we're getting some shiny stuff done. But it got to the point where I was, after Rocksteady, it was like, I've worked for Lionhead, I've worked for Rare, I've worked for Rocksteady. I don't want to move up north. What's left? And for me, making my own games, having my own story, it's always been my end game. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to tell my own stories. I want to create my own characters, my own universe. And because that's what I love. I love story games like Mass Effect, Skyrim, Fallout. These big story character-based games are my absolute favourites. And I want to be able to create something that has characters that well developed, the characters that you care about, whose stories you want to follow. And it got to the point where I was like, well, I've wanted to do this for so long, and my friend Ed at T-Clipper Games, we've been talking about it for about a year or so, and then we kind of discussed if we were to do it this way, and then with Lionhead going down, it was just like, and I hadn't heard back from a couple of big companies because HR is
terrible.
Interesting with some big companies, and it's just like, let's team up and do it now. You know, now is the best time to be doing this. You know, I'm lucky in the fact that I've got development experience under my belt. I know how a game is put together. I have so much more to learn, and I'm sure I'm going to hit many roadblocks along the way, but I do have an advantage over someone straight out of uni trying to put a game together, or someone that's jumping from television or advertising into the games industry. So I'm hoping we don't fall flat on our face, and that in the next year or two you'll see some very exciting stuff from us.
And then you can come back and do a talk for Dan about how it all happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I think we've pretty much run over, haven't we? It's time to run, but really quickly. And I'm only doing this because I know this is the question that you didn't want me to ask. Weirdest sound you've had to implement?
I hate you.
I know.
That's such a complicated question. The weirdest sound I've had to implement. I don't know, we've got a lot of weird sounds in the games. Like, one of my favourite little sounds is one that you can barely pick out. When you're in the Batmobile and you go into battle mode, there's a little UI sound that plays as the screen pops up. It's quite hidden in there, but once you're listening for it, that pops out. I had the pleasure of having to go up to Whipsnade Zoo and record chimpanzees one day, which was terrifying, because we just wanted some chimps like babbling. They don't do that. Chimps have two modes. They're either silent or they're kicking off. And when they kick off, it's awful. Like, the noise they make, they sound like they're killing each other. And they're just running around, rattling everything. So we can't use those takes because they're rattling everything. We just want the vocal performances. And we're behind the scenes at the zoo in the training area, which is about, they've given us a foot corridor between these cages and the chimps, and I'm shoved up against the brick wall with a microphone in my hand, like desperately trying not to be peed on by a chimp, because they're trained to put their crotches and their backs up against the cage so the trainers can take urine samples and take bloods and do all of that. But when you've got like this 200-pound male chimp like running at you and like starts hammering the cages and pissing at you, it's really quite terrifying. And after all that, we didn't get too much usable stuff. So what you hear in Arkham Knight now from the Stag airships is two lovely chimps called Phil and Elvis were the two that made the most noises. And then we had Coco, who made lots of little kind of puffy noises, and so we got her in, so you have a little cute noises from her. But yeah, moral of the story, chimps don't make much noise. Monkeys don't just sit around and chatter to each other. It's all silent body language until they're trying to kill you.
And on that note, thanks so much, Jess, and thanks for coming in last minute as well. And this has been fun.
Yes.
I could do this for way longer.
Okay.
Anyway, I think we're about to be kicked out. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming and listening and everything else. All the videos will go up online from this evening at some point over the next few days, I should think, so you can rewatch everything. Follow all the speakers on Twitter because they're all wonderful and insightful. Thank you very much. See you next time, hopefully.
Yes.
Cool.